Thank you all again for having me here. Really see if I can move things. Here we go. Yes, GitOps interoperability with CD events, connecting the disconnected. I'm your host today, Luke Phillips. What we're going to talk about today is kind of go through the journey of, GitOps to developer experience. What is CD events? What is the ecosystem like for CD events in the world? Some demos with Argo, Flux, and things like that, and kind of talk about other use cases and kind of set the stage for why I hope everyone will get a little more interested and engaged in this particular topic. So again, I'm Luke Phillips, a principal software engineer, and I want to give a special thanks to Costas. You might have seen him earlier this morning, today, wherever you are. We gave a similar version of this talk back in KubeCon, ArgoCon about a month ago, so he was very helpful in helping me develop part of this talk. So partial credit to him for this as well. And also for the last talk, I really appreciated some of the comments they had made about being, as the speaker said, that they were huge believers in open source. And getting into this topic here, I am also a huge believer in open source, and specifically the challenges I'm interested in is advocating for the interoperability between all open source tools that we use to compose our platforms and our architectures. So setting the stage here, as you know, this is your typical GitOps pipeline, perhaps, that developers are both making commits for their code for their applications, but then there's another pipeline and additional Git commits for defining the application itself that manifests how to run it, and agents running GitOps processes. So introducing this complexity now, what the developer might have been used to before, nice, say linear pipelines, and and before a lot of, say, like AI tooling, other cloud native tooling, where we're speeding up development and rapidly iterating on our applications. What was like very simple linear pipelines, now we're introducing a more complex flow where you have many more applications, many more pipelines kicking off all the time for all of your GitOps based applications. And so when you look at all the tools that make your application developer experience possible, you see that being able to report back, like, what happened in my pipeline, what happened in the CI process, the CD process, deployment processes, my artifacts, my Git scans, and all those kind of things. There's a whole ecosystem now of tools. And so I like to think of this entirely as application delivery rather than what people might typically think of as just CI CD. And so if we have all these tools now that we're composing together these challenges, composing together all these tools, how do we enable developers and other people in the organization to continue to track and be able to understand what is happening throughout the developer lifecycle? So it's really trying to change a lot of, say, preconceived notions. If you say, "Oh, I work on CI/CD," people understand that. When you say, "No, it's really application delivery," again, it's the composition of all these complex things. How do you again track the flow of the life of your application through all of those tools? And so one approach I'm looking at and thinking about is CDEvents. CDEvents is a specification, it's not a tool, a framework for describing and communicating and discussing continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous operation events. Again, tool agnostic, vendor neutral. It's a part of the continuous delivery foundation, and it provides a shared language for describing all of the events happening in our whole application delivery experience. To simplify, really, much like containers have standardized how we ship software, CDEvents standardizes how we communicate our software delivery events and everything that it takes to build and promote and manage all of our services in our platforms. What does a CD event look like? Here is one example here. A CD event message is typically composed of what and where, as well as some other custom data. So you might see here in this message where it describes, a standard type of CD event, environment created, information about your application, links, details about, where did it happen, what environment, what application, what source. Is the event coming from ArgoCD? Is it coming from Tecton? Is it coming from Flux? Things like that. There's also a custom data component, so you can fill that in with contextual information related to your application. Out of all of the events that exist in CDEvents, they track a whole variety of software development lifecycle events, whether it's core events, pipeline events, your source control events, testing events, continuous integration events, as well as continuous deployment and continuous operation events. I think those last two, continuous deployment and continuous operations, are most relevant to the world of GitOps. So let's walk through like what a typical action or a whole story of CD events that might exist in your enterprise. And imagine again your enterprise, your platforms, where I know I've worked at various large companies where there are multiple CI tools, there's multiple build tools, there's multiple deployment operations, things like that. So in this story here, where you have a developer, they create their branch that fires off a branch created event, a standard event there. And then they commit their code, branch initial commit event. This is a standard message. If you're doing, say, like DORA metrics and developer productivity metrics across your whole enterprise, rather than trying to figure out how to translate various tools' messages into something you can measure in your DORA metrics, you now have a very standard message that everyone can track, right? Here's where the pipeline starts for DORAs. And so after the developer has made that commit in their code, that's going to fire off their CI system, whatever the CI tool is. And those tools can fire off pipeline run started events, pipeline run finished events. Whatever your build tool is, you'll get a artifact publish event, and then you'll deploy your application. You'll get a service deployed message. This could specifically come from your GitOps tools, whether that is, again, Argo or Flux as examples. Once your application is running, you have operations and monitoring events. You can fire off incident detected events and service rollback events. Those can, again, come from possibly your GitOps tools as well as other workflow tools. Again, every event itself has a standard structured what, action, when, and where. Why is this important? Why do I think we should all be looking into CD events? Is really these big challenges of integration complexity, observability gaps, and vendor lock-in. So again, I'm used to large enterprises where we have a variety of different tools and trying to figure out how do I measure one CI build system versus another? How am I tracking where my builds are happening, as well as being able to, say if I ever want to switch CI tools or CD tools or artifact tools or things like that, I've built typically a lot of glue code around the specific messaging of that one tool. And if I can abstract that and give myself a little separation between what these tools message and some standard messaging, it makes it a little easier to adjust the complexity here and give myself better observability across the entire enterprise as well. And this is not just a theory today that I'm proposing some tools adopt this, but rather there are many tools today already producing CD events or receiving CD event messages. Jenkins has this capability, Tecton, Spinnaker, Flux has a listener for this, Argo Events has some capability. There's now other work in development. Harbor is looking into this, and part of my talk here is telling you about a proposal in ArgoCD to also adopt CD events. There's also more work in Flux that I'm also going to highlight as well. Who's contributing to CD events? There's a lot of major companies out there. There's a kind of vibrant ecosystem, IBM, Red Hat. I kind of put Apple right in the middle there. They're very involved in the CD events development as well. So there, major usage out of that. So where do I envision, like, what's the flow between GitOps and CD events? What are some typical examples? You could have your GitOps tool, Argo or Flux. They could be enhanced to emit standard CD events, and that can go directly to a CD events receiver, that being a webhook endpoint, API endpoint, things like that. You could probably, in your enterprise, you have standard event managers and other larger event queues and messaging, whether it's NATS and Kafka and all sorts of other cloud queuing mechanisms, things like that. You can easily set your GitOps tools to send their standard CD event messages to this event manager. That event manager can then send off the CD events to a standard CD event receiver that's aggregating all of this data together. Another possible idea to think about with CD events is, what if our GitOps tools received CD event messages and kicked off some kind of processing based off of that? You have that today a little bit, where in ArgoCD it has webhook endpoint receivers for your Git systems. So GitHub can send a webhook to ArgoCD, and that can kick off a synchronization or a reconciliation event. But why not think about what are other messages that Argo could possibly receive to and react to? And so taking that to mind, what if we put all the flows together, where you have different workflows out there in your enterprise, where those are managing like a database upgrade. Those workflows, after doing a database upgrade, kick off a task run finished. Argo or Flux could be subscribers to these messages and kick off a reconciliation, which causes a job to be produced, and that runs some tests. Argo can then send off a service upgraded or test results back into those messages. And really thinking about where I know I've never typically just ran one Argo in a large enterprise. There's many Argos, maybe many Fluxes, all scattered about. How do you measure all of these things across your enterprise? Again, if we have these standard events, it becomes a little easier to tell the whole story. So let's try out some demos here, and we'll tempt the demo gods to show some live coding. I've set up a couple of examples where I've created the mappings in ArgoCD using Argo's notification controller and its templates for notifications to create standard CD event messages. And I have a CD events receiver set up called CDEviz. So if you look up for the CDEviz, I have links later as well. It's a nice demo tool for receiving CD events, and has some out-of-the-box dashboards for CD events. And then as well, I'll do a quick demo of Flux, where it has as well. Flux has the ability to react to CD events. So just kind of showing that existence. What I mapped in ArgoCD was service deployed, service published, removed, incident type things. So let's see what happens if I switch over. So here's my Argo environment. So this is just the whole cluster that I've set up. Various Argo apps, demo apps. I have Argo deploying Flux. Forgive me for my sins there. And if you want to drill into ArgoCD itself in this demo environment, where in the notifications controller configs, you can see how I've created the standard webhook templating for what I've mapped CD events or Argo events into CD events. And this is how you might construct this message. Later on, I'll give you a link to a pull request where I'm trying to describe this in the Argo community and see, trying to look for feedback on how we do these kind of mappings. But you can see how a message gets built for CD events, how you handcraft one. And so if we go in our environment here, and if we take one of our demo applications and we go delete it as an example, this will kick off a bunch of service created events, things like that. And this is firing from Argo to CDEviz, and then I'll get into the CDEviz dashboards here. So here's one example of a CDEviz dashboard where one of the capabilities is, say, like you could track how an artifact moves through your enterprise, how an artifact gets promoted through environments and things like that. There's nothing specific about Argo here. This could be any other tool. And so if it's part of the journey is Argo, part of the journey is Flux, things like that, this is all just standard CDEvents dashboarding. And go back to some other example dashboards. There's CDEvents activity. So you can see, like, today I've been deleting and creating apps, just trying to create some dummy data. So you can track it again across your entire enterprise. Imagine all of the service incidences, all the upgrades that are happening to your enterprise. Go drill into upgrades, removed apps, incidents deployed, things like that. And this also, nice little dashboard to show you like real CD event messages coming through. So like here's an example, that custom data is an example. So Argo specific context added into the message that you can do other things with. The rest of the payloads, this is an example again of the CD events message. What was the event? A service upgrade coming from Argo. And where did that happen? This happened in, let's not use that one. Let's pick another one maybe. Here's a dev environment example. This is just a canned example there. The other dashboards examples are also a service demo. Again, this could be your whole enterprise. It's not specific to any tool. You get to see all of the services deployed or service incidents, and you can drill into, what environment did this happen to what tool, was it upgrades or other things like that. If you try out CDViz, you can scroll down. It has the ability where you can just create your own CD event messages, just drop them into the dashboard and just kind of see how it gets rendered and tracked there. Another part of the demo is just showing now the Flux environment. So showing that, again, what I have running on Flux, we saw all the Argo stuff, but here's some apps and components running in Flux itself. So here's an app, a guestbook app managed by Flux, and showing that it's running and all the other configurations that I've set up for Flux, specifically the CDEvents receiver. And then to do like the whole Flux demo here, where I'm going to create, again, showing you what's happening in Flux. Here's how you create a Flux notification receiver, and you just get to specify standard CD event messages. It doesn't, you don't know where this came from. You're subscribed to standard CD events. And we're going to construct a message here that we're going to just send in a curl post to Flux itself, saying here's a service upgrade, and however we want Flux to react to it. Typically, it's just Flux will then kick off a reconciliation on that process. So rather than trying to manage the integrations between complex tools, you can now do standard interoperability between your tools. And that interoperability across all of your platforms and enterprises, I think, is the real power of CDEvents. You can see here how we created a reconciliation and having a new reconciliation timestamp from our demo. So let's go back to the slides here. And in the slides, I just have screen captures of other components in case the demos didn't work. Here's real things to go check out, how things progress through all the dashboards and things like that. There's a link at the bottom if you want to try this demo at home. And finally, as I was mentioning before, this is not a native component of ArgoCD yet, but I've created a pull request here where I'd love to get your feedback on how we map ArgoCD events into standard CD event messages. This is just a markdown document proposal. Please go give it a look at and provide your feedback. What other use cases do you see here, and how can we work through making these CD event messages kind of a standard component of our GitOps tooling? Likewise, in the Flux, they also have a document where they're evaluating how Flux could do standard CD event provider messages. So also check out that pull request and provide feedback and interest in the tool. What other use cases could you imagine here for GitOps and CDEvents. So like I was mentioning before, imagine your enterprise where it's really like this. You have Argo instances of Argos or instances of Flux, many clusters all across your enterprise, across regions, zones, things like that. Whether you have a hub and spoke architecture, or like I know I've been challenged in my hub and spoke architectures before because I would like to have done a distributed Argo, but getting all the standard messaging out, I didn't have a good way to handle that before. I think this handles that situation now where it's, given the diversity of your architectures and toolings, that you now have one single event stream and are able to measure and observe, as well as create other workflows and standard integrations between all of your tools. You then get to kind of improve your standard developer dashboard, regardless of what tools are in your enterprise. So rather than finding the one tool that can do all of the build, test, deploy, monitor solutions, you can kind of pick the right one that fits. And so long as it is able to emit a standard CD event message, then you can kind of compose the things that work best for you. Other things to think about, again, our applications are typically much more complex like this, where you have various services, microservices, and composition of services. And how does, when one service like a front end microservice for payments, if it fails, what is the rollback workflow? While Argo or Flux might have their own rollback capabilities for that one service, how do you emit a standard sync failing message and kick off other complex workflows throughout your enterprise? Likewise, say you have this complex integration of services, and when one service gets upgraded, how can you emit a standard event and all these other services can react in some kind of way, going, oh, I need to kick off some automated testing or other workflows related to that. And likewise, I think like Kostas was demonstrating earlier this morning or earlier today in the talks, like how you create ephemeral environments with, say, application sets, things like that. While Argo has one capability, one pull request generator capability, maybe the composition of a ephemeral environment takes a lot more work than simply the Argo components. You want to kick off other workflows. So again, how do you standardize that messaging across your enterprise? And was kind of talking about that some more. And so to kind of conclude, really thinking about this complex integration and overlap of all the tools that make up our domain, our application delivery domain, whether it's your CI, your CD, your GitOps, your platforms, compositions, things like that. This is the challenge of what we're trying to measure and understand and create interoperability and all the tools that are composed in here. And I think CDEvents, again, if we can encourage the adoption in all of our tools, that it makes this interoperability story a lot easier for all of us. So again, CDEvents themselves, just a standard message for cloud communication. It is a opinionated subset of cloud events, if you're wondering where that came from. There's various tools out there, again, Jenkins, Spinnaker, etc. There are proposals for future enhancements in GitOps itself, whether it's ArgoCD and Flux. So please give these pull requests a look at. Please add your comments, things like that. You can find me on CNCF Slack at Luke. I'm typically in ArgoCD as various other channels, and you can connect with me here in this QR code and email below. Here's some links as well, CDViz, the demo environment. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke. Let's see if there's any questions. Someone mentioned cloud event spec. It looks like, I don't know if you saw that, if there's any relation to a cloud event spec.
Yes. Yeah. CDEvents is a opinionated subset of cloud events.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. We have a couple more minutes here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll hold Luke on for maybe another 30 seconds here. You can always Hangout. I like the fact that you used Flux as well, right? So it's kind of, it's definitely kind of like using all these tools. They're not like specific to like one tool or another, right? Like I think eventing, I think we all need need that in general.
Yeah, I think our whole enterprises, they're typically going to be, for any large enough company, you're going to have all the tools out there. You're going to have instances of Flux, ArgoCD, and for GitOps columns. Like, how do you create a common dashboard and story around all of your GitOps, however complex the architecture is? And I think these mechanisms will really help with that.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Unless there's not any questions, we can move on to Marcus. Oh wait. There's one more question. All right. Right at the last second here. I don't know if you've seen in the chat, but I'll say it out loud. Apart from monitoring CDEvents, what kind of other use cases where it can be useful to consume it and do some cool things with it?
And if I go back to the way up to the beginning, all the type of CDEvents out there. So it's really all the possible workflows you could ever imagine, where it's outside of just your GitOps domain, where it's like, oh, based off of a build started in CI, run testing, and you might have various testing teams and workflows around how to handle test situations and the relationship to, like, you've made it a source control commit. You have pipelines that are composed of many more of these various things. So it's really thinking about, the workflow composition of things, and again, the interoperability between your tools as well.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Luke. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for participation. Everyone, you can find probably most all of us in the CNCF Slack under various channels, but definitely under the Open GitOps channel here.